Palmdale, California sits in the high desert of Los Angeles County, cradled between the San Gabriel Mountains and the Mojave Desert. It is a place of wide roads, pastel-colored tract homes, and the kind of quiet that people move to from the city when they want to feel safe. It has the geography of a fresh start, clean air, open sky, the illusion of distance from danger. It was here, in a sprawling 3,400 square foot house on a suburban street, that LaNell Barsock built her life. She was a nurse. She was generous. She was loved. And on the evening of June 16, 2010, she became a ghost, dragged from her living room floor to her own garage, a plastic bag pulled over her head, left in a pool of her own blood as though she was something to be discarded. What happened inside that house was not random. It was not a burglary gone wrong. It was something far colder. This is the story of LaNell Barsock. She was the kind of person people remembered. Not because she demanded attention. She didn't. But because of the warmth she carried into every room. The automatic generosity that seemed to flow out of her like something she couldn't help. LaNell Barsock was 29 years old in the summer of 2010. She had grown up in South Los Angeles and decided early on that she wanted to be someone who helped. Nursing was not just a career, it was an expression of who she was. She earned her vocational nursing certification, then went back to school to become a registered nurse. Always moving forward, always building. Marcel Fomata, a friend who had met her in nursing school shortly after immigrating from Cameroon, described her as his guardian angel in America. She helped him integrate, loaned him textbooks, bought him 3 pairs of shoes because she noticed he needed them. She devoted herself to healing other people's bodies while quietly constructing her own life. By 2010, she was working at a health center in Los Angeles and living in the Palmdale house she had earned for herself. She was proud of it. She had every right to be. Her personal life was more complicated. She was involved with Louis Bonheur, a Haitian-born man she had met during her nursing studies. He was, by many accounts, devoted to her, but also jealous, controlling, the kind of man who checked her phone and tracked her movements. Months before her death, LaNell had tried to end the relationship. Louis had not accepted it gracefully. Her mother, Bobby Barsock, later recalled receiving a terrified phone call from her daughter. Louis had followed her in his car and tried to run her off the road, colliding with her vehicle, shattering her windows. Despite everything, LaNell stayed. People who love complicated people often do. She kept going to work, kept taking care of others, kept navigating her world with the quiet resilience she'd always carried. She did not know that someone else had entered her orbit. Someone who had been watching her life and quietly deciding it should be theirs. It began the way so many things begin now. Not in person, not with a glance across a room, but through a screen. A listing, a few words, a response. LaRenee Eleanor Austin was 31 years old and also lived in Palmdale. But where LaNell had built something, a career, a home, a reputation, LaRenee was struggling. She had difficulty holding steady employment. She was in debt. She moved through the world with a sense of what she lacked, and a deep, consuming hunger for something better. LaRenee had placed an ad in Craigslist's Women Seeking Women personals. LaNell, who was privately interested in women as well as men, saw the ad and responded. What followed was a brief romantic relationship, a few weeks of warmth and closeness before LaNell ended it. The text message she sent was kind. She didn't want anything sexual between them anymore, she explained. She was refocusing on her relationship with Louis, but she still wanted to be friends. LaRenee replied that she understood. She said she felt the same way. She agreed to the terms. She was lying. She absolutely saw LaNell Barsock as someone who could take her out of that and give her a better life, and when it was taken away from her very quickly, in an instant, she ultimately lashed out and decided to kill LaNell as punishment for it. Prosecutor Jason Quirino. LaRenee had not simply developed feelings for LaNell. She had developed an obsession, a total, consuming fixation not just on the person, but on the life. The house, the career, the stability, the identity. In the weeks after the breakup, instead of moving on, LaRenee did something investigators would later describe as deeply disturbing. She began impersonating LaNell Barsock. When she went on dates with other women online, she didn't go as herself. She went as LaNell, adopting her persona, using her identity, trying on her life like a coat. She kind of took over our victim's persona, Detective Joe Espino would later say. LaNell had no idea. The danger was already inside the friendship before she could see it. The gun was purchased in February 2010, 4 months before the murder. LaRenee texted LaNell early that morning, around 9:34 a.m., asking if she could come over to finish doing her hair. She had been working on LaNell's weave the previous evening. She was coming back to finish. It was, on its face, completely ordinary. Louis Bonheur left the house to get his truck repaired at a mechanic's in Los Angeles, an hour's drive away. The house would be quiet, empty of anyone who might witness anything. LaRenee arrived. What happened in the hours that followed cannot be fully known, but forensic evidence would later reconstruct the essential truth of it. LaNell Barsock was shot once, in the back of the head, at close range. She was shot in the living room. A pillow had been used as a makeshift silencer to muffle the sound. She was likely seated, perhaps in a chair while her hair was being done, trusting, unaware, her back turned to the woman standing behind her. It is a particular kind of horror. To sit with your back to someone while they work on your hair is one of the most vulnerable positions a person can occupy. You cannot see what is happening behind you. You are, in the most literal sense, placing yourself in someone else's hands. LaNell had done exactly that. After the shot, LaRenee did not leave immediately. She cleaned. She scrubbed the floors. She found a rug soaked in LaNell's blood and stuffed it into the backseat of LaNell's own car. She put on latex gloves and worked methodically through the aftermath, leaving her own DNA pressed into the fingertips of those gloves without realizing it. She dragged LaNell's body from the living room to the garage. She pulled a black plastic bag over LaNell's head. The original plan, investigators believe, was to put LaNell in her car and drive the body somewhere, make her disappear. But something interrupted it. Fear, time, the approaching possibility of Louis' return. The body stayed. So LaRenee pivoted. She sat down and wrote a note, in LaNell's voice, addressed to Louis. Dear Louis, I am leaving you for Ike. He makes more money so you can do whatever you want to do with the house. I am moving out of state with Ike. I have been sleeping with him for 4 months now. Good luck in life. She placed the note where it would be found. Then she drove herself to the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department's Palmdale station. She walked inside covered in blood, and she began to scream. When LaRenee Austin burst through the doors of the sheriff's station that evening, she was a sight that commanded immediate attention. She was covered in blood. She was frantic. She was crying, barely coherent with apparent distress. She told deputies what had happened, or what she needed them to believe. She said she was LaNell's best friend. Had been for 10 years. She said she had walked into the garage and slipped on something wet in the dark. She said she had fallen, looked around, and seen legs. She had followed the legs and found a body, her best friend, a plastic bag over her head. She said she had then heard a noise inside the house and seen Louis, LaNell's boyfriend, somewhere in the dark interior. She had fled to her car, she said. Louis had chased her in his truck all the way to the station. It was a compelling lie. It had detail. It had texture and emotion. It gave investigators an immediate suspect, the jealous, controlling boyfriend, and a narrative that made intuitive sense given what they already knew about Louis' past behavior. It pointed every light in exactly the wrong direction. Detectives Bob Kenny and Joe Espino drove to the house on Rocky Lane. LaNell Barsock was lying on the garage floor in a pool of blood, a black plastic bag over her face. She was already gone. Investigators initially believed she had been bludgeoned, but an autopsy corrected that. One bullet, close range, fired into the back of her skull. The plastic bag stayed with Detective Kenny. Usually when somebody puts a plastic bag or any type of covering over a victim's face, he would later explain, it means they don't want to see that person. They don't want that person who is deceased watching them. So we made the assumption that whoever had done this killing knew the victim. He was right. He just didn't yet know how right. There were also the signs of interrupted cleanup, scrubbed floors, the bloody rug in the trunk of LaNell's car, latex gloves near the body. Someone had tried to erase what they'd done, but the erasure was incomplete. Evidence was still there, patient and waiting. Louis Bonheur was found that night at the Los Angeles home of LaNell's mother. When detectives told him she was dead, his reaction was immediate and raw. That's not me. That's not me. That's not me. Why they do that to her? Oh my God. He sobbed. He was, from the investigator's perspective, a reasonable suspect. He was controlling. He had checked her phone. He had confronted her earlier that day about a secondary cell phone she used to contact a man named Ike. There was also the forged note, the handwritten breakup letter in LaNell's voice, positioned perfectly to give him a motive. Investigators showed it to him during questioning. He said it didn't sound like LaNell. They arrested him anyway and held him for further questioning. It took about a month of CCTV footage review to confirm what he had always said. He was in Los Angeles at the time of the murder. He was at the mechanics. He was nowhere near Palmdale. He did not kill LaNell Barsock. He was released. And quietly, the investigation turned. The detectives who had been watching Louis began to watch the woman who had reported the crime instead. The woman who had been there. The woman covered in blood. Whose story, examined carefully, was developing cracks. The first crack was small. LaNell had claimed to be LaNell's best friend of 10 years. But when investigators spoke to LaNell's mother, who knew her daughter's world intimately, she did not recognize LaNell Austin at all. Not from the name, not from a photo. A best friend of a decade, invisible to the mother. Then came the bullets. When LaNell had arrived at the station, a routine search had found 2 live rounds in her purse. Now, with ballistic evidence in hand, those bullets were compared to the one extracted from LaNell's skull. They matched. The gun had been purchased by LaNell in February 2010. She had walked into the police station carrying ammunition from the weapon that killed her supposed best friend. The gloves came next. The latex gloves found near LaNell's body were tested. Inside the fingertips, LaNell Austin's DNA. A bloody footprint at the scene also matched her. The forged note had been written in a hand that was not LaNell's. The impersonation was confirmed by other women she had dated, presenting herself as LaNell Barsock. Layer by layer, the story dissolved. Underneath it was something cold, calculated, and utterly without remorse. By the time investigators moved toward arrest, LaNell was gone. She had felt the investigation closing around her, the questions sharpening, the detectives' attention unmistakably shifting, and she had made the decision to run. She left California. She left the United States entirely and disappeared into Belize, a small Caribbean coast nation with dense jungle and sparse population. The kind of place that can swallow a person, if they know how to stay swallowed. For a time, her whereabouts were unknown. The case was featured on America's Most Wanted. A tip came in. She was found. With the cooperation of Belizean authorities and the FBI, LaNell Austin was apprehended and extradited back to California, brought back to face what she had done. She went to trial in 2015, 5 years after walking into a police station covered in LaNell's blood. She pleaded not guilty. The prosecution laid out the evidence, the DNA in the gloves, the matching bullets, the forged note, the bloody footprint, the gun bought in February, the impersonation of the victim, the flight to Belize, the lies told from the very first moment. The jury convicted her of first-degree murder. She was sentenced to 2 consecutive terms of 25 years to life, a minimum of 50 years before parole. She is currently incarcerated at the California Institution for Women. There is one detail from the crime scene that investigators, criminologists, and everyone who has followed this case keeps returning to: the plastic bag over LaNell's face. Forensic psychologists have long noted that covering a victim's face after death is a behavior strongly associated with killers who knew their victims personally. It is the act of someone who cannot bear to be seen by the person they have just killed, who feels, on some level, the weight of what the dead are witnessing. LaNell Austin had spent weeks obsessing over LaNell's life, impersonating her, trying to inhabit her existence. She had looked at LaNell and seen everything she wanted. And after she shot her, she could not look at LaNell at all. She covered her face. She wanted LaNell's life so desperately that she was willing to take it. And still she could not stand to see the cost. Every attempt LaNell Austin made to erase the crime ended up producing evidence of it. The gloves she wore to handle the body bore her DNA. The rug she stuffed into the trunk was soaked in LaNell's blood. The floors she scrubbed still held traces. The note she forged did not sound like the woman whose name it bore. There is something almost poetic in the way evidence accumulates around a lie. LaNell had planned, bought a gun 4 months in advance, composed a cover story, cultivated a false friendship to maintain access to the victim. But the planning had limits. It did not account for CCTV footage placing Louis in Los Angeles. It did not account for a mother who didn't recognize a supposed decade-long friend. It did not account for the specific ballistic signature of the bullets in her purse, or the biological specificity of the DNA pressed into the inside of latex gloves. One of the other women LaNell had been involved with around the time of the murder, when interviewed by investigators, said something that stuck with everyone who heard it. She said she considered herself lucky to be alive. We do not know precisely what she experienced in her time with LaNell Austin. We know only that she perceived something, an edge, a darkness, a capacity for something that made survival feel like fortune rather than default. LaNell Barsock had not been warned. She had no context for what LaNell was capable of. She had met a stranger through a screen, offered her kindness and friendship, and tried to manage the end of a brief romantic connection with as much grace as she could. She did everything right. It wasn't enough, because the danger was not in anything LaNell did. The danger was in what LaNell had already decided to do before LaNell had any idea what was coming. Among all the evidence, perhaps nothing is more chilling than the breakup letter. LaNell composed it in LaNell's voice, surrounded by blood, with a dead body in the garage and scrubbed floors still damp around her. She addressed it to Louis, told him LaNell was leaving him for another man named Ike, that Ike made more money, that she was moving out of state, that she had been sleeping with Ike for 4 months. She ended it, as LaNell, in LaNell's name, with good luck in life. It was a forgery, but it was also something more disturbing than that. It was a final impersonation. She had spent weeks going on dates as LaNell Barsock, inhabiting her identity, trying to own her persona. In the aftermath of killing her, she put on that persona one last time and used it to construct a misdirection, to speak in LaNell's voice from beyond a death that hadn't yet been discovered. LaNell Barsock did not get to leave behind the words she actually wanted to leave. The last written communication bearing her name was not from her. It was from the person who shot her, still pretending, in the cooling quiet of a Palmdale garage, to be her. The forgery eventually failed, as forgeries do. The handwriting was wrong. The phrasing was off. The mother who knew her daughter's voice recognized immediately that this was not how LaNell spoke. And when investigators turned the full weight of the evidence against LaNell, the note became one more count in the ledger of what she had done, not a successful misdirection, but a record of how far she had been willing to go. It is easy, in true crime, for victims to become their deaths, to be defined entirely by the violence done to them, to exist in memory only as the centerpiece of a tragedy rather than as the full, living person they were before the story of their death began. LaNell Crystal Barsock was not a centerpiece. She was a person. She was someone who bought shoes for a man who needed them without being asked. She was someone who loaned textbooks and gave life advice and went back to school because she wanted more for herself, and earned it. She was someone who navigated a complicated romantic situation with imperfect grace, as most people do. She was someone who tried to end a brief connection kindly, offering friendship instead of total severance, because that was the kind of person she was, generous, even in small difficult moments. She was 29 years old. She had not yet turned 30. The career she was building, the house she had earned, the community that loved her, all of it was still in the process of becoming. She had years ahead of her. She had, in the most ordinary and irreplaceable sense, a future. LaNell Austin wanted that future. She took the life but not the life, not the texture of it, not the warmth of it, not the specific irreplaceable thing that made LaNell Barsock the person she was. She took only the fact of existence and ended it. What she got in return was a prison cell and a parole hearing decades away. LaNell's mother, Bobby Barsock, carries the memory of a phone call, her daughter's voice, screaming, saying that Louis tried to run her off the road, Mama. Screaming. She had worried about Louis. She had not known to worry about anyone else. None of them had. Detective Bob Kenny said it simply. The lights start to go on that we're heading in the wrong direction. There is something almost luminous in that image. The slow brightening of clarity in a dark and deliberately obfuscated situation. LaNell Austin had constructed a convincing darkness. She had given investigators a villain, a narrative, a story with emotional logic and enough detail to hold. And for weeks, it held. But evidence is patient in ways that people are not. The CCTV footage waited. The DNA inside the gloves waited. The bullets in the purse waited. The forged note waited to be compared against what LaNell's mother knew of her daughter's handwriting and voice. Each piece of evidence was a light. The lights came on one by one. LaNell Austin had run from a California suburb to a Central American jungle. She had traded one kind of disappearance for another. But the thing about trying to disappear is that you always have to exist somewhere. You always leave traces. You are always, on some level, findable. She was found. She is in prison now. She will be in prison for a very long time. The parole board will see her, or consider her, in 2027, though she will not be eligible until 2032 at the earliest. LaNell Barsock is buried in the California earth. Her friends carry her with them. Her mother carries her. The story of what happened to her continues to be told, on television, in documentaries, in articles, in documents like this one, because the world insists, with great stubbornness, on not letting the dead be forgotten. The house in Palmdale still stands. The desert sky above it is still the hard blue of a painted ceiling. The neighborhood continues, as neighborhoods do, indifferent to the history held inside the walls of one specific home on one specific street. But the lights are on, and they stay on, and they illuminate everything. This was the story of LaNell Barsock. Motive us with a like and a subscribe to give more. If you have any suggestion, please let us know. Hope to see you next time.